So the first question goes to Ben. Meghan Markle's best friend, Amanda Seales, has said that Donald Trump faked his own assassination attempt. Is it true or is it false? Now, given that we had to debate what this woman's name was, I think it's fair to say that we don't know who she is, do we?
No, I don't know who she is. I struggle with Meghan Markle, actually. But it is extraordinary. The whole Trump assassination is extraordinary. The complete lapse in security, the inability to police that high vantage point, which apparently was the best point from which to take a shot, according to the Senate interview that I heard yesterday of Cheetle. That there were spectators who were pointing out the shooter for minutes before the security guards did anything. And then I thought it was really peculiar that having protected the former President Trump under the podium, when they emerged after the shooting had, I suppose, stopped, instead of covering him up and exiting quickly, he stood proud over the tops of all the security guards, his head clearly in view again. And, you know, there's so many questions.
Do you know, Simon Brodkin is Lee Nelson, for those people who don't remember him. He was the one that broke into Donald Trump's resort, the golf resort in Scotland, and he said the big secret about the US Secret Service is they're not very good. Now, I have to say, time and time again, the idea that somebody with a high-powered sniper rifle can literally lie on a roof so close, it's unbelievable.
130 metres from the shot. I mean, that is really close.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you don't even need telescopic sights at that
Well, it just tells you how bad of a gunman he was, if we're being brutally honest, at the end of the day. And we should be very thankful that he was.
I mean, presumably, James, you've spent a lot of time around security people when you worked for Nick Clegg. I mean, obviously, my experience is this. There will always be undercover people, won't there? So it might well be that the bloke walking past in the trainers actually is a firearms officer and you don't know. But one would assume that when the public are going, who's that? They either say it's one of us or it's not one of us and arrest him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've never worked for the American Secret Service, but I can only say good things about the British coppers that guard our top flight politicians and how much we need them, because we live in an age, I'm sorry to say, where the threat to politicians, I would argue both in this country and in America, is as high as it's been in my lifetime. But the American Secret Service is supposed to be put up there as the best in the world. They're a bit showy, you know, the beast, all the sort of the moves they do, the sunglasses. But this, look, speaking as a non-expert, it looks like really slack work. This guy's been pointed out by members of the public. He's got a shot away from 100 yards. And he's a bad shot, but he's not that bad. He nicked the guy's ear.
But how about the other element to this, which is the Meghan Markle's best friend, Amanda Seales bit, which is this. Why is there so much hatred in politics now that somebody would say something like this, fake the own assassination attempt? It is fairly obvious that Donald Trump is somebody who is a high risk. It's also true to say that some of the hatred in American politics is what is motivating people to attempt to kill him. And then to pretend he did it himself, I just don't understand it.
I think it's preposterous. I think it's incumbent on people on my side of the argument, people who are not fan of Trump or his politics, to utterly condemn this, and indeed any political violence. The idea that you could get a guy to agree to die, because the shooter was killed, quite rightly, you managed to arrange for him to have a shot that nicks a guy's ear and then dies for it. It's just preposterous. It's clearly
now, Ben, up until recently, you were involved in Reform UK. They've had their own problems with Nigel Farage's security. And I've said openly on the show, and people have disagreed with me, that the reason that people throw a milkshake over Donald Trump, over Nigel Farage, is because they don't have Semtex. I believe that it is an act of terrorism in of itself. How worried are people in political parties in Britain?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've never been worried, but it could be foolishness that prohibits me from worrying. My mother repeatedly texted me during the election that just been, saying wear a stab vest when you go. And I said, Mum, for goodness sake, they're all just normal people. Yeah. And of course, they are all just normal people. But it just takes one lunatic. Yeah. And, Nigel had a milkshake thrown on him, but it could easily have been acid.
Could have been.
And I can't remember the name of that comedian. I think her name ends in Brand. Is it Joe Brand? I don't want to malign anyone. But was it Joe Brand who said that if someone should throw acid on Nigel Farage? I mean, that's an awful thing to say, because I mean, you'd have to be daft to follow the advice, but there are people out there who are slightly intellectual.
Sorry,
I'd pick up on something because I think, Ben, you've hit the nail right on the head here. Where is the consequence for people like Joe Brand to make that point? We had Sheila Fogarty on LBC say all Trump had to do to get some attention was wear a bandage on his ear. The downplaying of this assassination by the left, I think, is absolutely horrific. Yeah, David Aronovich went on Twitter pretty much, I think, within an hour of the attempt, saying, "Oh, I wish the guy hadn't missed," kind of thing. And then, when everybody piled on and said, "What do you think you're doing here?" he then suddenly said, "Oh, I'm the victim here. I'm the victim here." There is absolutely zero consequence for people who make these comments.
Pete, this is why.
1 second. The problem is, if it was somebody from the right who had made a comment about, say, if it was Joe Biden who had been shot, they'd have been dropped from LBC like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the double standard is absolutely horrific,
Pete,
and it must be called out.
But Pete, here's my point. This is why I'm saying that this should be an act of terrorism.
Yes, agreed.
Because if we turn round and say that throwing a milkshake over Nigel Farage will be considered a terrorist offence and you go to prison, then suddenly it'll quell it. Because I think what happens is somebody throws a milkshake, then somebody throws hot coffee, then somebody gets a knife, and I think it's just an escalator thing.
I mean, let's look at the definition of terrorism is the use of violence mainly against the general public for political ends.
Yeah.
By the very
And that is
definition,
precisely what
by
it
the
is,
very
yeah.
definition, it is an act of terror. How it is not an act of terror to attack a politician in what we've seen. Let's not just forget that we've lost 2 MPs to assassination in this country. Let's use that word because that's what it was, one from the left and from the right. This isn't just an ideological issue. This is an issue of law, and I think our laws need to catch up.
I think it's a great idea of yours. Make it a terrorist.
I do. I completely.
Because what they're actually doing is they're sitting there saying, I have a personal veto over any politician, and that is terrorism to me. But anyway, it's Saturday night. It's meant to be a bit light.
Keep it light.
Keep it light, guys.
Keep it, as I always say to people, keep it light. It's a meet and greet. Anyway.
First up, assassination.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, do you know what? Well, it was you who wrote the bloody question. It's not my fault, is it? That is the producers of the show complaining that we'd got a bit heavy for Saturday night.
Yeah.
It's a question about attempting to kill someone.
Yeah, it's a heavy question.
Okay. Okay, so has Meghan Markle's best mate said that Donald Trump faked his assassination? Is it true?
It's the
or is it
kind of
false?
thing I'd expect her best friend to say, so yes, it's true.
It is unfortunately true. Okay, to James. Doctors have been told to warn patients about the dangers of climate change. Is it true or is it false? Now, you're in a difficult position here, aren't you? Because on the
Because I believe in climate change.
on the one hand, you're determined to talk up climate change because you're a Liberal Democrat. On the other hand, you recognise this is ludicrous. So this
I'm hoping it might not be true. And of course, the genius of this quiz. Well, look. As always with these things, I assume it started with a germ of a good idea, right? There are things that, the changing temperature in this country, for example, it's good advice to tell people to whack the old sun cream on.
Sun cream. I've needed a jumper all summer.
I'd love to put some sun cream on. Yeah, I'd love to put
hang on a second. But weren't you born in Pakistan?
I know. I wear a jumper at 35 degrees centigrade.
Whereas where me and Pete are from, we get the barbecue out at if it stops raining.
At 5 degrees.
Take a cagoule off till you were 7.
By the way, good use of the word cagoule.
Since I was 7.
Thank you.
But look, I think with most of these things, look, governments need to educate people. They need
Do
to
they?
put. Well, look, public service messaging is a good. Is
it? No, I'm not being funny.
Wear your seatbelt, for example. That's probably the best example of government messaging.
Drink
ever.
driving.
Don't drink driving. Yeah, public service messaging is good. How you go about that, right, is obviously important. Like the advert, if you sit up late at night on TV, you watch those government adverts, and some of them are okay. Right, that's quite good that they're informing people like don't drink, drive, don't leave your sausage.
Yeah, but if you're at home at 2 a.m, you've probably already drunk home from the pub.
But you're admonishing yourself.
Look, no, I'm not being funny. I've watched TV at 3 a.m, and it involves a bottle of vodka. Let's be honest.
Nobody awake at 3. No one's awake at 3 a.m. It doesn't involve a bottle of vodka unless they're at work. And then
publicing, there's a very thin line between public messaging and indoctrination, and nudging
this is where I will say, though, you
Yeah.
could call it indoctrination, but I have to say, I think climate change has been proven to exist beyond all scientific
No one,
doubt.
no, no one.
So that's not indoctrination.
No one-
that's scientific fact, the same way we teach that the world is round.
No, I wasn't suggesting that it was indoctrination.
Oh, there is some disagreement. Yeah,
The
apparently.
world is flat.
Yeah, they don't believe in global warming because they don't believe the Earth's a globe.
Can I just point out that actually this is to do...
That's a good one, I like
with
that.
This story is actually to do with the Royal College of Physicians.
Yes.
This isn't a public messaging thing. This is actually advice given from an organisation that represents about 40,000 doctors, advice to doctors on what to tell patients. So they're supposed to look out for something called eco-distress and eco-anxiety. So
Yeah,
if
I've
you're
got
that kind of worked up by climate change and, you know, all this kind of stuff that, and it's lunacy. This is a niche interest that is using its power to influence a lot of doctors and then impact the lives of patients. I would very much rather the Royal College of Physicians just go back to treating people.
Oh, that's not going to happen.
I know, yeah.
That's
also,
not going to happen.
But like the idea that one of them is they say, if you have non-clinician hours, for the sake of the climate, work from home.
Yeah.
It's this kind of messaging.
But Pete, it's like the
just
police.
lunacy.
It's like the police are going, hey, listen, if there's nothing to kick off Pat on Twitter, then we're not interested.
Yeah,
are we?
I know, yeah.
But anyway, James, I'll tell you what, we're going to be fair to James.
Right.
To be fair, Peter's confirmed that no public money was involved.
Okay,
so
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
that got you off with Habib, because Habib was about to have you for that. But anyway, have doctors been told to warn patients about the dangers of climate change? Is it true or false?
I would say it's true.
It's absolutely true.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness, I'm in shock.
Really?
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. Dishonesty. So, Pete,
Yes.
firefighters in Leeds claim the riots were too dangerous for them to attend. Is it true or is it false?
Well, sadly, I know this to be true. I lived in Leeds for a little while. I studied there. I love the city. I think it's a great place. But what we saw on the streets that night and into the next day, I thought was absolutely horrific. It must be condemned. And it's about time we did something to fix this problem. It is not a one-off. Let's not forget what happened in the streets of Leicester. And also on the same night, what was happening here in London, where there were extra officers on the streets because of a problem that was happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah, something happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
I know.
Now
That-
we have to deal
now
with.
we-
That
have to
is
deal
at
with it.
least the problem in Leeds was something that happened in Leeds.
Leeds, yeah.
But the Whitechapel incident
Yeah.
was something that happened 7,000 miles
But
away.
what I will say is
6,000
that,
miles
in my
away.
opinion, West Yorkshire Fire Service positioning themselves a mile away from this incident because their health and safety said it was too dangerous to go in, I think is a degradation of duty, and they I think they put those people.
Well, James, I'm sorry, but I've got sympathy with the firefighters. I'll tell you why. Because these people have moved into an area, they've created a ghetto, they've created a community within a country, and they want to tear public facilities to pieces and beat up police officers and firefighters. Why can't a firefighter say, screw you, burn it down if you want to? We're just going to deal with people who want our help.
Well, I don't think the fire service is ever going to say burn it down, mate. So that's probably not their core message.
They could be a bit bored.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Where I do agree
keeps
with
them
you,
in business, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and fires are all-time low, aren't they? Home fires. But look, where I do agree with you is firefighters are not riot police. They are not trained to deal with an angry, rioting mob. And if they say it's not safe, if they're worried that the fire engine itself might get torched, you're talking about buses getting turned over, cars getting set alight. They shouldn't be forced to go in there in the same way that you wouldn't expect paramedics to go in.
I don't mean to be rude.
That's why you have riot police.
I don't mean to be rude, but a fire engine costs £250,000. How many houses would it take in that part of Leeds?
That sounds like a slur on the north.
No, can I tell you something?
We're allowed to do it.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah.
If you were to demolish Leeds, it would still be cheaper than losing one fire engine. And by the way, I'm allowed to say that because I'm a hater of Yorkshire. It's Yorkshire on the phone. They're going, "Hey up, lad! All that nasty battles, lad."
Well, I think we have to look at why did this kind of happen, and obviously we have the incident involving the Romani families and the children being taken away. But I think that actually is to one side. I think this was just an attack on the police. Yeah. And I think we have to start to ask why. And I think that is because the police force in this country is not taken seriously. There has been no consequence to any riot, to any mass protest, probably since we saw everybody taking the knee at Black Lives Matter.
It's an encouragement to bad behaviour. The way the police have been policing is to encourage further criminality.
If you take the knee to a riot, why the next riot will just
But
get
Ben,
worse.
let me ask you this, because obviously you're from the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah, my dad is. I was born there, yeah.
Yeah, sure. But what has happened continually, and it's not just with Indians, it's not just with Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, but we've seen it with Roma and others, where they've created their own enclaves. Dr. David Starkey on my show the other day said the number one thing we've got to do is break this link to certain villages where the cousins all marry the cousins. And so there is a constant process of non-assimilation.
So the big mistake we've made, apart from unbridled immigration, is diversity, equity and inclusion, which is effectively the promotion, celebration of diversity.
Yeah.
And that diversity is encouraged to preserve itself in our society. They're encouraged to live in ghettos, in amongst themselves. Their cultures are not required to integrate with our culture. There's no vision of an integrated, harmonious, settled society. The way that diversity has been promoted through unbridled immigration is everyone living in their own silo. And that is going to cause inter-ethnic issues.
And when people talk about the Ben Habib background, they talk about Cambridge University, they talk about business leader, they talk about running for parliament. People who are not interested in talking about family backgrounds, immigration.
And I'm not interested in my colour or my ethnicity. Yes. I couldn't care less. I'm very proud of my father's Pakistani heritage, but I am British, and the country for which I stand and whose interests I wish to promote is the United Kingdom.
Yes.
And I'm afraid people, when you celebrate people's culture and where they come from and everything else at the exclusion of a settled society, you get these kind of schisms, and they're not going to go away. And we've got to wake up. And I just want to say one more thing, since I'm on the subject, and it's this. Immigrants in the past came to this country, and I'm not saying that they're not doing this now in small numbers, but they came in small numbers, and they came with aspiration.
Yes.
They came in love with British values.
Correct.
And they came here to make a better future for themselves within the framework of the United Kingdom. We are now taking in people who hold us in contempt.
Yes.
And they come from cultures and backgrounds, war-torn countries, and they don't want to promote the United Kingdom. No. They come here wanting to damage us, and you've seen it in the way that sectarianism is kicked off in our own politics. We managed to get rid of it after hundreds of years of progression. We got rid of it, and now it's back with a vengeance. And this country is heading. I've said
this before, Ben, and people can be critical. My grandmother came from Greece because she thought Britain was better than Greece. Now, you can like that or not. Her brother disagreed, so her brother lived and died in Athens. I mean, that is what has to happen with immigration. People have to love this country. But anyway, Pete, we are going to move on. Were firefighters reluctant or against going to help in the Leeds riot because it was too dangerous?
Well, clearly it's what happens when you don't have enough leisure centres. So, yeah, it's 100% true.
It's absolutely true.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break. It's time for That Was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
OK, on to Ben. Now, Ben, before we go any further, we've had a bit of a laugh, but you did lose the Reform Party deputy leadership.
I know.
Come on, dish the dirt, Ben.
Where is it?
Very careless of you, Ben, actually.
Very careless.
Look. Let me get this right. You were like
that took a minute.
You were like Gorbachev. You went on holiday and discovered there'd been a coup d'etat against you when you came back.
Are you kidding? I was working my socks off for the party.
Yeah.
I have done non-stop since March 2023. Look, Nigel became leader, appointed himself leader just before the general election. And Nigel wanted his own team at the end of the general election. And the argument put forward was that the deputy leader should be in the House of Commons. And sadly, I didn't win my seat.
But why not? Why not have two deputy leaders?
Yeah, why not?
Well, it sounds to me, and I like Richard Tice very much, that our biggest donor has to boot out the way of Ben Habib.
The biggest donor being
Tice.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that. I mean, I think Richard has absolutely earned his spurs. I mean, Richard took the party, by the way, from 1% in the polls together with me, if I may add my name to that progress we made, to 16% in the polls when the general election was called. But notwithstanding all my contribution to the party, it is irrelevant. What's relevant here is that Nigel is leader, and Nigel has absolutely every right.
You've been done over, though, haven't you?
Well, at a human level, I have, I suppose, because I was a core part of the team that got the party to where it is, and I'm no longer a core part of the team. But the good news is...
Were you shocked?
I was surprised, yeah.
Well, that's the same as shock, isn't it? I mean,
I would say it's one down.
It's one down. It's not DEFCON 1, DEFCON 3.
But hang on a second, right? Just let me understand the transaction. We'll get this out of the way and then we'll do the quiz. But let me understand the transaction. What, you got a phone call from Nigel Farage saying thanks but no thanks? You're sat in the Costa del Sol. I mean, how does this work?
I was actually in Warsaw on business. I was in a meeting. Nigel called. I couldn't take the call. So I got a text, yeah.
A text message.
You do sacked by text?
Well, I mean, he did call, but I was in a meeting and I said, I'll call you back. But, you know, obviously he wanted to...
Can I ask something? It would seem to me that regardless of what the party has been called, whether it's Reform or the Brexit Party or UKIP, in the eyes of the public, it's broadly Nigel Farage's outfit, right? He's so much more famous than everybody else.
Really? More famous than me?
Yeah, that's,
oh, my God.
Sorry, I couldn't soften that a touch. I don't want to leave you shocked. I want to leave you surprised, not
The
shocked.
man's been through things.
Well,
Not even I'm that mean.
I suppose my question to you now is, having had a good election, perhaps one slightly fewer seats than you want, but by any benchmark, a good election.
98
result.
second places.
Yeah, a good election result. As you now build the party, that model of a one-man leader that's all powerful, all pervasive, I would suggest is not appropriate or of benefit to the party. And I would ask sort of how Reform might seek to tackle that over this Parliament.
I mean, the point you make is absolutely 100% correct. And it's a point that I've been making. It's a point I made to Richard before I joined the party. In fact, I wrote an article in the Sunday Times. I highly recommend you read it.
A very good article.
10 days ago, explaining how if Reform is to stand for the democratic unit that is the United Kingdom, which it does, then it has to democratise.
Yeah.
It's fine for an insurgency to be under the control of a small number of people or one individual because it allows speed of decision and you can get on and, take ground, as it were. But now that we've got 5 seats, now that we aspire...
How many seats have you got, Ben?
Got 5 seats, yeah.
How many seats have you got?
4.
4. Do you know he's refused to do the underpants dance?
I know. Get your underpants out. This is a matter of...
Buy me a drink
This
first,
is a
Ben.
matter of integrity.
That coming from Reform.
So okay, let me ask you this question.
That's why you didn't win your seat.
So you got the text message from Nigel Farage, so obviously you couldn't take the call. You got the text message. What did you reply?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I can't remember. It wasn't...
Not repeatable.
Yeah. Look, Nigel and I...
This.
I just want to make it clear, there is no personal animosity here whatsoever.
There should be.
Nigel is perfectly within his rights to choose his team. What matters to me, genuinely what matters to me, is that the party now delivers on the promises it made to the British people, the contract with the people, which effectively means delivering a proper Brexit, deregulating, all that kind of stuff for which we stand, number one. Number two, we mustn't turn our back on the 4 million people who voted for us and the millions more who would have done if they weren't nervous of a Labour government. Many voted Tory, so I'm rabbiting on.
Oh, it's Nigel Farage.
Yes.
He said, I've never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. Oh, I know democracy's not popular with you lot.
Yeah. And who are you anyway?
Anyway, well, look, Ben, I think you did well in the general election. It's just a shame that your own seat didn't come in. So we'll give you a round of applause.
Thank you.
There we go. Even Barnes.
Can I just say, if you'd have ended up being leader of Reform, I probably would have joined you.
Really, Peter?
I probably would have.
Yeah, wow, well, I'm flattered.
Because I think you answered the question as to why I've never had much respect for Reform. We say Nigel wanted this and Nigel wanted that. Until you democratise, it's not a political party. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that Sunday Times article, which I thought was brilliant.
Well, thank you.
And, I hope you do go on to do something, Ben, because I tell you now, the right needs people like you.
Well,
Me and you have our disagreements.
Well, they do also. It is worth pointing out, and we don't. I mean, I don't invite Ben to comment on this because it would be wrong for him to do so. But there will be a series of peerages, won't there, for Reform Party now that they've got 5 seats in the House of Commons, James?
I mean, look, the peerages system is completely...
Yeah, you ruined it.
Yeah,
You guys ruined it.
Yeah,
I remember. So to our American audience, the King can appoint as many people to the House of Lords, and it's fair to say, after 2010, he went wild. David Cameron, I don't know if you know this, but David Cameron appointed more people to the House of Lords under the government that you worked for than Henry VIII Elizabeth I and King Edward combined, right? So
I'm not even going to try and defend it.
I remember a question.
It should be elected for a start. But
I remember
the
a question, James. I remember a question in the House of Lords where a Conservative member asked the minister, can my noble colleague name a member of the Liberal Democrat Party who has not been given a seat in the House of Lords? And the minister stood up and said, I confirm to the noble lord that I don't know the name of any Liberal Democrat Party member who has not been given a seat in the
Not very Liberal, not very Democratic.
You've made me feel really good about myself as a Liberal Democrat member.
Yeah, that's right. James McGrory confirms here he's the only Lib Dem. But anyway, on to the question, Ben. 200 million was wasted on the government's failed Rwanda scheme, which saw just 4 migrants deported. Now, I think this is very much a question about the level of the failure, isn't it? We're saying 200 million. Is that true or false? By the way, before we start on the question, I just want to ask you this. Do you buy this argument from the Irish Republic that it was a deterrent?
No.
Or do you believe it was a complete waste of money?
I don't think it worked as a deterrent. I think any migrant with half a brain cell recognised the fact that no one was ever going to Rwanda. And I don't think the numbers really changed much this side of the election and now with the Rwanda scheme scrapped. Rwanda was never going to work. It was an impractical proposition. Even if you had people going to Rwanda in full swing, it could only take 3,000 or 4,000 people. That is 10% of one yearly intake across the channel. You had a 90% chance of success if you tried to get into British territorial waters. That's the kind of odds that any would-be illegal migrant would run.
And of course, if you fail, you have another go the next day. So, of course,
Absolutely.
when we saw... I mean, I thought it was quite funny, and I've said this multiple times, when... they built a wall round the English port in France and made Britain pay. I mean, that's something that I think is an appropriate thing to do because of Donald Trump. But even then, when they were catching people and sending them back, what you forget is the following day they would have another go.
Yeah, another go. And so Rwanda was never going to work. There's only one way to stop the boats, and that is to physically stop the boats.
Is it 200 million for 4 people deported? Is that true, or is it false?
It is false. It was 700 million for 4 people. And I think actually it was 700 million and £12,000 because they each got £3,000.
Unbelievably false.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break. It's time for That Was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
OK, welcome back. Our next question is to James. Trump's former advisor, Sebastian Gorka, has said that Kamala Harris was only endorsed by Biden because she was a woman. Is it true or false?
There's a lot of this going around, isn't there? And there will be, I'm afraid, until the election comes, because Harris is now going to be the Democratic nominee.
Can she win?
Yes.
She can win. She can win.
How?
America is a highly divided nation.
Yes. Right.
Look, there's a long way to go in this election campaign. She is, by any benchmark, untested at this level. But America is an incredibly polarised society.
Was it James Madison who said that vice presidents are famous but unknown?
Yeah.
The US president rather than the Tottenham midfielder.
So you lost us at the sports analogy.
I love the fact I'm looking blankly thinking, who?
You're absolutely right. But America is a highly polarised society, and the assassination attempt on Trump, and now I have to say some of the rhetoric that's going around about Harris, I don't think is going to help that. And
It'll help her, actually.
Yes.
I don't think it's going to help political discourse in America. I don't think it's going to help the election run smoothly and non-violently, which I think everyone wants to see. Yeah. I would love to see an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate take some of the heat and fury out of this American election campaign and lead to a less polarised society. I think what we're seeing is the opposite. I think the kind of comments you're seeing here, I think the kind of comments that were made completely wrongly about the Trump assassination are going to add fuel to what is already a pretty roaring fire.
Just to be clear,
I think it's really dangerous.
Just to be clear, so we are clear, you're expressing your disappointment that the assassination attempt didn't take the heat out.
But look, I mean...
not advocating another...
Sorry, get my words right. You'd think, wouldn't you? Well, you'd hope in sort of any reasonable set of circumstances that someone is literally shot while campaigning to be president. You would think people would dial down the rhetoric for a bit. And it's not happened.
But James, we said this at the beginning of the show, so I don't want to be repetitious. But, what seems to happen, from what I can see, is people look at these acts of violence and just say, well, you know, ha, 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 I don't like that person, or, oh, that's a disgrace, I like that person. Nobody seems to look at the universal point that this level of hatred... Look, at the end of the day, I don't believe Kamala Harris is evil and going to destroy the American nation. Right. I just think that she's not as good as Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that's what the debate should be. Yeah. And some of the stuff that I've read, you know, since she was... her name was put in the hat effectively by default, was that, you know, she's a woman of colour and therefore she should not be challenged by other people and she's more likely to win. And all of that's irrelevant. The question singularly should be, is she going to make a better president?
But I will say one thing. I will say one thing. I'm bitterly disappointed in this country. I think of all the great cultural exports of the United States of America, I think racial tension has been the most recent and probably the most pervasive. There is an issue with racial tensions in America. What I'm sad about is the fact that it's come over to Britain. So maybe there is some significance in having a black woman in America, perhaps in a way that wouldn't in Britain.
But we shouldn't identify people by their colour.
I agree with that.
Everyone's equal. That's the only way to equality, is to recognise everyone's equal. There's no progressive discrimination that obviates discrimination. Discrimination is discrimination, whether it's positive or negative.
I remember somebody saying, well, it's not proper racism if it's a minority who are discriminating against the majority. Call South Africa, baby. Call South Africa.
Quite. Pete. The interesting thing is I actually think if the Republicans aren't careful, this is a repeat of 2020. Because when you look at this strategically, the reason Biden won was people didn't like Biden and they didn't like Trump, but they didn't like Trump more. So that is why people felt comfortable, despite all the problems of Joe Biden, voting for him because he wasn't Donald Trump. You now have... Then you had Trump versus Biden again, but Biden was seen as the worst option, so people felt comfortable in that choice, voting for Donald Trump. You've now got somebody who's not Donald Trump, who, people have reservations about very rightly, and I think they will now feel more comfortable voting for Kamala Harris than they will be for Trump.
Of course.
And I think this is where like you're saying, this kind of language of oh, she's a woman of colour, she's this, she's that, and just the negative connotations that are attacking this woman, I think is a very dangerous thing for people like Sebastian Gorsuch.
Well,
it is short-sighted, it is wrong, and I think it could cost Trump the election.
If Kamala Harris wins the presidency, will you dance in your underwear on this show?
Not a bad call for a political strategist to make, though, is it? You get that in your clips folder.
By the way, can I tell you why he actually refused, right? So he claimed it was all to do with whether the TUV were actual Brexit Party MPs, sorry, Reform Party MPs.
Yeah.
However, the real reason he refused to do it is because I phoned up Reform UK's press office and suggested doing it in Parliament Square with Farage and Tice and the media. At that point, oh, it's Tice, he was saying, I was looking forward to it. That was the moment when he felt it got a bit out of hand.
No, what I am going to say, though, is to answer that...
So if you refused the Kamala Harris underpants dance...
It's too early. I think that we are far too early.
It's too early in the day to show you in your underpants.
It's too early to make that kind of call. What we've had before is now irrelevant because Biden isn't the candidate. We have to stop thinking as it's Trump versus Biden. It's not. It's Kamala Harris is her own political animal. I think she's weaker in many areas. I'd love her to be criticised on a non-existent record, but I see she's a black woman narrative.
Biden did the robot when he was
strongly.
walking around. It was strange to watch, wasn't it? It was like Roddy's back. He's like Brezhnev. Anyway,
I think to her other advantage, she's probably the best record as vice president has been mixed, but where she has been very good, in my opinion, is on the issue of abortion, which I do think is a real Achilles heel.
It is.
I do.
And you know Trump himself doesn't.
Well,
believe
we're not.
he doesn't.
No, we're not doing abortion because I'm massively anti-abortion, and we're just going to have a big argument. No, we do need to. We do really need to move on. So has Seb Gorka said that Kamala Harris was only endorsed by Biden because she's a woman? Is it true or is it false?
I think it's true, but he also might have added of colour.
Well, either way, it is absolutely true. OK, so to Pete.
Yes.
The Royal Parks have claimed that Prince Albert's memorial in Hyde Park is highly offensive because it reflects a Victorian view of the world. Do you know, I got told once that Prince Albert's genitals were so large they were unsightly in trousers, and that's why he invented the intimate piercing to strap his penis to his leg.
Great knowledge.
Great knowledge, very niche knowledge.
But I mean, she had about 15 kids with him, didn't she?
Has that ever come up in the pub quiz?
Yeah. Depends which pub quiz you go.
Why is it called the Prince Albert?
Yeah.
Oh, she had 15
Do you
kids
know
with him.
The thing I find most interesting about this is the Royal Parks, which I didn't know was chaired by Lloyd Grossman, by the way. I didn't know that was him. It
Who would live in a house like this?
Yeah, represented Victorian attitudes. Well, I don't mean to break it to people. I don't know if it's a shock, but it was built by Victorians.
And he was married to
1872.
Victoria.
And he was married
by
to
Queen Victoria.
I'm sorry. Why are we so shocked by this? The thing I didn't like about this is that the Royal Parks is owned by the Crown. And it receives taxpayer money.
Yeah.
When you go on the website, it says things about how people don't like empire and all the rest of it. It is one side of the history. It is not both. And more importantly, it is a taxpayer organisation making a value judgment on something that is supposed to be up for discussion. It is the way that people who tear down these statues, people who criticise all of bits of history, they're making judgments based on their politics, their views, their ideas for everybody else.
Absolutely
the
right.
arrogance of that is dangerous.
But Pete, I'm now of the view that every committee that is not explicitly right-wing will become left-wing in the end. Because all of these people get involved. I mean, we've got it here down the road. The only reason that the statue of Thomas Guy is still there is because it is legally owned by the hospital. The trust he established with money he did not earn from slavery, by the way, his own trust are desperate to be rid of it.
Yeah.
His own trust.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that he was a slave trader, which of course he wasn't.
Which he wasn't.
I mean, this is the thin end. Well, we've already had the thin end of the wedge. We're seeing the wedge getting deeper and deeper.
Yes.
And before you know it, they're going to require the statue of Queen Victoria herself to be removed.
Oh,
But
it's a
here's-
matter of
but
time.
here's-
It is
it's
a matter of time.
But here's the simple solution. And James, I'm going to stick it to you slightly. This is our final question. Look, the reason for all of this is the Quangocratisation. Try saying that after 5 pints. The Quangocratisation of Britain. I don't understand why the Lib Dems and the Conservatives didn't come in 2010 and get rid of all these executive agencies, all of these quangos that have so undermined our democracy, and end up because all of these organisations, as Pete said, all in receipt of taxpayers' money, all full of absolute rotters. Nobody agrees with them, but they bunkered themselves into that position. Surely there was a discussion with Nick Clegg when he said, let's get rid of this, it's undemocratic.
Well, I think if you're in danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater to say anyone that works in a non-departmental government body is some sort of,
Crazed communist.
Yeah.
That's the kind of baby I'd like to throw out.
I'm not surprised. But look, I think there's a much bigger issue here, which is that these statues have become literal physical manifestations of the divisions in our country, and there's no need for it. You can comfortably live with your own country's history while also acknowledging that lots of it wasn't perfect.
Okay.
You can do that without tearing statues down. The idea that we need to chuck away anyone who works in a non-departmental public body or go at each other over something that we inherently
Sorry,
share.
I thought you'd had a stroke.
just angry.
It gets you angry, this show, doesn't it?
Okay.
That's what you get.
Okay. The problem is for poor old James, he has to defend all these old communists.
It was to good effect, by the way.
Okay, so just to ask you,
I'm never going to live that down. Can we edit that out?
No.
So have at the Royal Park said that Prince Albert, who was married to Queen Victoria's statue, represents Victorian values. Pete, is it true or is it false?
It's true, and Andrew Scattergood, who is the CEO, should resign immediately. It's 100% true.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true. So, okay, we now have to decide who our winner is. And I have to say, the biggest loser recently has been Ben Habib. But do you know what? We're not going to make you the winner today. And I'll tell you why we're not going to make you the winner. Because I think that there is a seat in the House of Lords winging its way to Reform UK. And you've got to be on that list. Pete is, in the Conservative, but he's never worked in Downing Street. So the only person, really, whose peerage has passed him by is James McGrory. So he wins with 8,526 points. Congratulations. Now, 34 days as UKIP leader, Lois Perry resigned. We're going to have the first interview with her since she came back onto the scene. Do not miss that. Coming up right now.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break. It's time for That Was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
Hello and welcome back. Well, it was the UKIP general election campaign that wasn't. A new hope with Lois Perry being elected to the leadership role, and it's all turned badly wrong. After just 34 days, Lois Perry resigned. Lois, welcome to the show. This is your first interview since coming back. I have to say, you look great.
Thank you. Well, that's what 6 weeks of R&R and putting my phone in the sink does for one.
What went wrong?
I'd just been discharged from hospital, having nearly died from pneumonia. The priest had come in and my father, who I'm estranged from, was on his way to say goodbye to me. I'd been leader for a couple of days at that point, you know, so it was a very difficult time.
Was it the leadership itself that caused the problems?
The leadership itself, no. I believe that they had a vision. They wanted something different. That's why Ben Walker wanted me to run. That's why he asked me to run after Neil Hamilton had steadied the ship. But there were people in the party who would rather always be on the outside, you know, chipping in. They didn't want the right to unite. There was a pathological hatred from, not least, my opponent for the leadership, Bill Etheridge. You actually chaired one of the hustings against Nigel Farage. They didn't want to team up with people that shared similar values, whether it was Nigel or whether it was the Tories or whether it was anybody. And they absolutely loathed me for it. But there was something a little bit more sinister, something quite a lot more sinister. And that was, they felt, or there were certain elements within the party, once I took over as leader, that felt that they wanted to go after quite an extreme viewpoint. Now, people have got different views about Tommy Robinson. A lot of what he said has come true. But let's be honest, he has been convicted of immigration offences in the United States of America. They wanted to have a link up. There were strong elements, and that was at the very top of the party as well, wanted to have a link up with Tommy Robinson. There was a big march. I gave permission for my people to go, but I didn't attend. That says a lot. I was asked continuously. I felt railroaded to have allegiances with Tommy Robinson. I couldn't do that. That wasn't where I wanted to go. When Nigel Farage took over as the leader of Reform, that I felt, what am I doing? I'm being railroaded into following a path that I don't want to follow, even to the point that on a Zoom call, I felt that I had to say, oh, maybe we'll look at it in the future, having some sort of tie-up with him, even though I didn't feel it at all. When Richard Tice was leading Reform, I felt that there was a place for me to be, not blowing my own trumpet, you know, I have the female Farage, charismatic, whatever. I felt that there was a place for what I was doing in UKIP. As soon as Mr Farage took over Reform, I just wanted to support him. And obviously they picked up on it. I really, really, really felt that we could unite, that we could merge, right will unite and create a new opposition. And there was no way that was ever going to be allowed to happen if we teamed up with Tommy Robinson. They were back-channeling, Andre. I told them, I said no official contact with Tommy or unofficial contact. And I heard rumours that they were doing it. There was also some other stuff, homophobia. There was some dodgy stuff. I'm not homophobic. I'm not anti-trans. In fact, as long as you're adults, I don't care what you get up to. I've got no problem with that. You know, I'm not anti-Muslim, but I am anti-radical Islamism.
But what does that mean? Because I've met people in UKIP. They all seem perfectly all right to me. I mean, the idea that they are what, racist, homophobic...
No, I'm not saying everybody is. I'm not even saying the majority are. The Tommy Robinson crew brings certain elements with them. Extreme anti-Semitism as well. You know, when I was doing the debate with Bill Etheridge, I'm not saying that he is in any way anti-Semitic, but he wouldn't support Israel in the hustings. He wouldn't even support us helping them with weapons, things like that, against radical Islamism, against people that behead babies and rape women. Where's that come from? But it wasn't something that I wanted to be the head of. And to be honest, I hadn't the energy to pull them into the centre because I'd been so ill. And as you know, there'd been personal situations that had been going on for over a quarter of a decade, which had really taken it out of me as well.
And what was that?
Our mutual friend, I'm not going to name any names, a long-term relationship that should never have happened. that really took it out
So
of me.
just let me understand this. So you're a divorced woman. You spend part of your time in Essex, at what was the family, I suppose it's still the family home, and also part of the time in London. And during
Not
that
anymore, because he's not paying for it, but yeah.
Sorry, somebody paid for your flat?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was cut off quite brutally. As I say, the personal situation was something that should never happened and that I regret, and I'm sure he regrets as well. So I couldn't do it anymore. I had a burnout. I couldn't do it anymore. But what I did do, was brought in a brilliant deputy for what they want. He's a very,
with respect,
and now he's leading UKIP.
With respect, you weren't complaining about UKIP being right-wing or going to the right. You were complaining about an element who loved Tommy Robinson, rightly or wrongly, were far more anti-Muslim than you, were homophobic, and all the rest of those things. So what you are talking about is a poison within the party, not A, the party itself, or B, to say that Nick represents that in any way.
No, that's absolutely right. I have no criticism of UKIP. I have no criticism of Nick or Ben Walker. Ben Walker in particular has been very, very good to me. And I do have an extraordinary amount of regret. And I am sorry that I let the party down by resigning when I did. But I had no choice. I think it's fair to say...
What was the straw that broke the camel's back then? Because you've talked about ill health, and we can talk... In fact, I'll mention now, you have a disability, very severe arthritis.
I don't want people to know that.
It's something you don't want people to know.
No.
But I spent some time in Israel with you, and it's fair to say that the physical capability that you would have, you don't have,
no.
And you do try and disguise it. And obviously, you have to have medical treatment for that, which includes incredibly strong painkillers, which tire you out in of themselves. But you've got that disability. You had the pneumonia. You had the problems at UKIP. You had the personal life falling to pieces. Which of those was it that really caused the end?
As I said, it was a cacophony of all of those elements together. I mean, 2 days, it's been very widely reported that, that I was dining. I had a lunch with Nigel Farage a couple of days before I made the decision. People have said, it's because of him or there was some deal or whatever. Actually, 2 days before that, I can exclusively reveal I've never told anyone this. I was so unwell in so many different ways.
Because of your disability, which I know you're embarrassed to talk about, you've had to take strong painkillers.
Yeah, I've been on morphine.
And you also drink as well. I'm not saying that.
No, and I was drinking too much at the time. Not when I was on the road, obviously.
But in this very studio, there have been occasions when you've really struggled to focus because of the amount of painkillers you were taking. My view has always been that you were taking far too many, all on prescription, I should say. We're not talking about illegality.
No.
But the fact that you were putting yourself in far too much physical exertion was leading to you over-medicating. Is that a fair criticism?
I think there was definitely occasions where I wanted to hide my disability and I probably took too many painkillers.
Have you spoken to UKIP?
No.
Have you spoken to any of the officials, the party chairman or the new leader?
Not yet, but I will do.
How are you expecting that to go?
I'm just going to be as honest with them as I've been with you. I am sorry, but the decision that I made was actually to... it sounds over the top. I wouldn't be sitting here now if I hadn't made the decision that I've made. It's fair to say that the UKIP leadership, on top of everything else, that I hadn't had a break for 3 years. I've been running this political organisation, Car 26.
Was the UKIP leadership killing you?
It could have done. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that if I hadn't have made the decision that I'd made, that the UKIP leadership could have killed me. It could have been the final straw.
You destroyed the UKIP general election campaign.
Did I?
Did you?
I don't know. I don't know if I did, actually, because it got UKIP. It's regrettable what happened, but it was out of my hands. It really was.
Do you feel that you lied to the UKIP members? Because had they known about your physical frailties...
No, they all knew. They all knew because it was all over Twitter. Even when I was, apparently hours from death, I was managing to tweet. There
was a point in the leadership election when I said to you that you ought to pull out on the grounds that you're physically not capable of doing it. But a lot of people got hurt by you not doing that. And that is something that you do have to accept.
I do accept it, and I am sorry. I became... Plaything is a strong word, but maybe a little bit of a political or media plaything for a group of very wealthy Brexit millionaires who wanted to get a message across.
What does that mean?
I knew what I was taking on when I took it on, and I was determined, and I had a ball. I really did, and I'm really proud of everything that I've achieved with Card 26. And although, as I say, I do have regrets with UKIP.
But you're alluding to having been exploited. I mean, you can't describe yourself as having been a plaything for millionaires and not accuse them of exploitation.
But I'm done. It's done. Next time, the next bit of my life is going to be on my terms, and working alongside and with people that love and respect me and don't see me as a caricature. I've
got to say one thing before we go, Lois. We've had a discussion in advance of this. Nobody who you have named personally was involved in any form of exploitation or indeed the plaything element, or indeed did you have...
No, nobody that I've named personally, and I would argue quite strongly against that. I haven't been exploited. Okay.
That is the former UKIP leader, Lois Perry. Questions to be answered, but I do think that an apology goes a long way. Until next time, goodbye.